So the Texans offseason, I think they've had a good offseason so far. Seth Walder of ESPN.com put together his NFL offseason grades. I'd love to know what Nick Caserio thinks of these. He's such a big advocate of report cards before any of the players involved have done a single thing for the team.
It's funny. One of my I'm not on TikTok very much, but I have one little cut up of Nick Caserio from 2 years ago talking about how stupid draft grades are.
Yeah.
And it continually I get notifications that there's comments on it and everything. So I think that now people see it and they still think that it's like they think it's from this year's draft.
Right.
And he's not. That's how angry. That's how indignant he is in this clip about how stupid draft grades are.
This article probably triggered that video back to the surface again, I would imagine, on TikTok. This because it's a one of the leads on ESPN. It's one of their most trafficked articles of the last 24 hours. What would you give, before we get to the Texans grade, Seth, from Seth Walder, what would you give the Texans if you were a professor giving out report cards to all the kids in class here?
I would write a preface to this article saying, look, I agree with Caserio. The problem with any kind of off-season grades or draft grades or whatever immediately afterwards is you just flat out don't know.
Yeah.
So many moves that look stupid end up being brilliant and vice versa. But I would have preferred that they were more aggressive in addressing the offensive. It keeping the B region for me.
Yeah.
So, and I might obviously. We could be 4 weeks into the season, and it'll look like they should have gotten an A for that because the O-line is playing well, or vice versa. But I would probably give them a B+. I liked a lot of what they did. My personal preference was I wish they would have been like the Bears or the Vikings, who were really aggressive in getting the higher caliber free agents.
That's the last
on the
part.
Offensive line.
The last part is what you touched on there, because I think if you just left it at, I would hope they were aggressive on the offensive line in addressing it. My response, if I were Caserio, would be, we were pretty aggressive in addressing it. We got rid of 3/5 of our starting offensive line.
Right. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they traded up to draft a guy in the second round.
Yeah.
But then the free agency signings were a lot of guys that are like, okay, good, solid NFL player, but I'm not,
But your definition of aggressive, I think, is what everybody else's is, which is aggressive and you feel like it's much improved. The Bears are a great example of that. I think you just touched on them. The Bears had just as bad an offensive line last year as the Texans did. The only person that got hit more than C.J. Stroud at quarterback was Caleb Williams. Now, some of that is on Caleb Williams for extending plays and so forth, but they went out and got Joe Thuney. They went out and signed Dahlman from Atlanta, the center, who's like a top 5 PFF guy. They traded for Jonah Jackson, who's kind of a distressed asset with the Rams. So they were aggressive in not only tearing it down, but building it up with what feels like much higher level talent.
They were, you know what they did? It's kind of like what I did with my mustache. They were kind of disgusted with themselves, so they said, screw it, I'm gonna shave it off.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shave off the mustache.
This is what they did.
Trade away 2 guards trade away 1 guard, cut another guard, and we're gonna grow a new mustache. They've just they're kind of slow to grow facial hair. Now, they're kind of like the 15-year-old kid standing outside the convenience store asking bums to buy him beer.
Yes,
like it's just they're in that moment of the rebuild.
That's right. Walder gives them a B+. So
that's about where I would put him.
And when I was looking at this article yesterday, I said it feels about right. That feels about right. He has biggest move I liked, move I disliked. Biggest move, trading away Laramie Tunsil, and I think that's undeniable. That was the biggest move that they made this offseason. Says offensive line play sunk the Texans' offense last season. I agree with that as well. So naturally, they dealt their best offensive lineman away, sarcastically, he says. It's a move I struggled to assess at the time and still do, given its unorthodox nature. As wild as it seems, I didn't hate it because the return was strong. A 3rd-round pick, a 7th, a future 2nd, and they swapped 4ths. Houston must have believed the haul was worth more than Tunsil. Perhaps they were worried he'd want a new contract soon. I think that's probably a concern as well. Who's still a great pass blocker, but isn't on the same level in the run game. Hey, Seth, what would we be saying if Bill O'Brien was the one who made the Laramie Tunsil trade?
That's a great question, because we got to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
All right? The difference between the Laramie Tunsil trade and between the Laramie Tunsil trade and DeAndre Hopkins trade. One is that people very much approved of DeAndre Hopkins. Texans fans very much liked DeAndre Hopkins and looked at him as one of the strengths on a team. 2 was the return that they got for DeAndre Hopkins, which was universally panned as a ridiculously bad deal. So with Laramie Tunsil, the feeling is different. If Bill O'Brien had done it, I think people would have been questioning it, but I think in a lot of ways, that's, like, be honest with yourself, too, about how you might have felt about Bill O'Brien at the time. It wasn't necessarily the same level of vitriol as when everything fell apart.
Yeah.
That Laramie Tunsil wasn't as popular as DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
Not as good a player at the time. Very, very good player, don't get me wrong. But then also, Laramie Tunsil got what all the capologists and everything say is a good return in the trade. So it was a fair and balanced trade. The value the Texans got back was about what most of the cap people I saw said, yeah, that makes sense. They didn't say that the Commanders worked one over on the Texans or that the Texans screwed the Commanders. They're like, that seems like adequate compensation.
Yeah, and I guess I'm I'm thinking too. It's a complex question because this trade. I don't know if I've ever seen a trade that was made that was so, like, you look at it, it is a bit of a side-eye trade. A team that has the worst offensive line in football trades their best offensive lineman. Team that has the hardest time protecting its quarterback trades away a premier pass protector. And yet, the approval rates, unlike the Hopkins trade, this trade within Houston were through the Texan fans. 80 to 90% when we polled them on Twitter said we like this trade of getting rid of Tunsil because they, like you and I and everybody else here, they watch snap to snap and they followed the team all week long and they know he never practiced and they know that he probably shouldn't have been a captain and all those things.
Well, no, and then he led the league in penalties.
And that too.
That a lot of those penalties come at inopportune times or took you out of scoring position,
no doubt.
all those things.
No doubt. And yet I think there was an element outside of Houston that looked at this trade a little Hopkins-ish. Walder touches on it there. Offensive line play sunk the Texans last season, so naturally they dealt their best linemen away. I think outside of Houston, if it was O'Brien making the deal, they would have been like, oh, my God. I think Caserio has enough goodwill banked, obviously here in Houston and outside of Houston, where certainly people in Houston are willing to see how this looks. They approved of the trade, but I think even people outside of Houston, like Walder says, I struggle to assess it at the time and still do. As wild as it seems, though, I didn't hate it. The return was strong,
Yeah, and this is where if you find yourself, because there's still these people that, including in the media, that feel like they need to stick up for Laramie Tunsil or something. And this is, if you find yourself in a conversation with somebody who says, yeah, he's one of the best pass protectors in the league, this is what you need to tell those people. Because you know what I'll always say is all those people love to point out his Pro Football Focus pass protection grade.
Yeah.
And look at it. It's one of the top 4. And I always say, well, why don't you show his other Pro Football Focus grades?
Yes.
Because Pro Football Focus has him as the 21st or 22nd best in football last year, not a top 5.
Right.
And they'll say, well, Pro Football Focus in their grading factors in penalties way too much. All right, okay. If that's how you feel, if you think that's overly weighted, here's the problem with that. Hey, Laramie Tunsil is an incredible pass protector, don't you know? Okay, well, those guys like Trent Williams typically have fewer than 5 false starts in a year or pre-snap penalties in a year. Often, a lot of times, 0, 1, or 2. Peninsula, all those guys, So what you have to realize is Laramie Tunsil gets these great pass protection grades because he's kind of cheating partly. Yes, he is really. I love watching him. He's an artist, but he's also, by damaging the team in these consistent pre-snap penalties, he's cheating the grade system a little bit. It's almost like if you're like, wow, that guy's a straight A student. You're like, well, yeah, but he was also copying off the guy next to him. But he's a straight A student. Like, no, he's getting a jump on the snap count, and he doesn't give a single damn if it hurts the team or, and this is most critically, all right, it's 3rd and 4. Laramie has a false start. Really no big deal for Laramie because he's gonna be good in pass protection on the next down no matter what.
Yeah.
It really, really, really screws your struggling guard, your struggling center, your struggling right guard when all of a sudden you take a 3rd and 4, which is it could be either or. It could be run, could be pass. Quarterback wouldn't have to. You can hit something quick and get the first. Sudden, it's 3rd and 9, and there's that much more pressure on the interior offensive linemen to pass protect longer, to have defensive linemen that are in pass rush mode, all that stuff. So it's a double whammy on the rest of the team. And that's the kind of culture that you just can't have on a struggling offensive line.
Nope.
It was just, and it was infuriating to me to watch because it's just so selfish. It's so incredibly selfish. And if you bring up the Pro Football Focus pass protection grades and don't bring up any of the other Pro Football Focus grades, you're being a little bit fraudulent. I'm sorry, but you are.
More than
you're
a
being
little
a little bit fraudulent.
More than a little bit. That's a great breakdown. Move I liked, move I disliked. We'll hit these quickly. This is Seth Walder's report card. Gave the Texans a B+ for their offseason. Move I liked, trading down from 25 to 34 in the draft. So that's the move he likes. And just to contextualize it a little bit, that was when the Giants traded up to get Jackson Dart and the Texans moved back to 34, picked up a couple of third-round picks in the process, and drafted Jaden Higgins, who they may or may not have had as the top guy, one of the top guys on their board at 25. They were still able to get him at 34.
The thing I liked most about that was, and I think this entire draft was like that, that Caserio has very much of a kind of a gangsta, we don't love them hoes type of attitude about draft prospects. You know, like, hey, love them, leave them, you know, whatever, and just
move on.
You don't fall in love with prospects to the point where you're like, oh, we got her. Oh, it's a sweet spot. You kind of try to stay detached emotionally as much as possible.
Yep.
And match up with, okay, are we picking at a spot where it makes sense that we're drafting this guy? Because you know that by and large, if you let your heart rule things too much as a GM, you're going to get destroyed in the long term.
Yes.
So
Bill O'Brien.
Yeah. You just can't be impetuous.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say you can never fall in love.
Right.
They were clearly in love with Will Anderson.
Yes.
But you got to be selective. You can't go out asking every girl you meet to marry you.
That's
you
right.
know? You're going to get screwed, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Move he disliked. We'll hit this real quick. This may be the indication that the Texans had a really good offseason, is that the move he dislikes, Seth Walder, is trading for Ed Ingram. They traded a future 6th for a backup guard, and that's the move he disliked.
Right, yeah. And didn't he say something weird is going on with ESPN in my computer? Didn't he say something like, hell, maybe they just look at him as a guy that's going to be a backup or something? Like, yeah,
exactly.
They're probably, and they think with potential upside. But as of right now, the most likely scenario is that Titus Howard is going to play right guard. And I think a lot of people writing these articles, and they're doing it for 32 teams. I don't expect them to know this. I think a lot of people writing these articles just don't realize that Titus Howard is probably going to be a guard this year. Or there's a very good chance he'll be a guard.
Yeah, you may be right. Yeah, real quick, he says this. I did not like the Ingram trade. The Texans surrendered a future 6th-round pick for the former Viking, who was benched last season. If Ingram ends up being only a depth player, giving up a 6th-round pick and paying him he's this year will be a steep price. Okay, I mean this isn't a team that's dealing with
attention to salaries these days.
Right. And it's not like the Texans. And it's not like the Texans right now, Seth, are a team that's having to cut guys to make cap. You know, like it's. I mean, they're up against it a little bit, but this. You had to kind of. I look at it as he had to kind of dig to find something here that they did where you're like, no, that's a really bad move that they made. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's not crushing them for it. He's just giving them. He had to pick a worse move, and that's the move that he had to pick. Then,
good offseason.
That's pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah, that's good offseason.